You also got to be really disciplined as a leader to be out talking to your people and to really see what they're doing. I still need to get better at that, and our people still need to get better at it. But at the end of the day, it is people that make all these things go, and people matter. So it's pretty simple.
This is Lead with Culture. I am Kate Volman, and on this episode, we're talking about strategies to create a coaching culture with trust and open communication. We all know how important communication is in an organization, but so many leaders aren't being intentional around putting processes in place to foster better communication. Statistics show that 86% of employees and executives cite the lack of effective collaboration and communication as the main cause for workplace failures. My guest today shares some really great ways that he and his team are creating spaces for people to foster effective communication, share their ideas, and grow together. Adam Smith is the president of HB McClure. He has transferred skills learned from being raised on a dairy farm and from a long wrestling career to the business world. Please enjoy my conversation with Adam. So we have an opportunity to work together. Obviously, you have a dream manager, and I get to serve as the dream manager for some of your people, which right off the bat obviously showcases that you believe in culture. You make culture a priority over at HB McClure. So before we kind of dig into everything, I wanted to hear your perspective on how do you view culture? Like, how would you define culture and why do you feel like it's important in your organization?
Yeah, I think from a definition perspective, I view culture as a shared vision of the future. That includes what the future looks like, and it also includes, those behaviors and those actions that are required to actually get to that future. And in terms of how important culture is, if you don't have that, as particularly as you scale a business, it becomes more and more challenging to keep everyone moving in the same direction and really just to try to maintain efficiency and also maintain a cohesive group of employees that are working towards the future.
I love the simplicity of your definition. Over the past few years, especially, obviously, there's been a lot going on in the world, and leaders have had a lot of challenges, more so than we typically do. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've been facing over the past few years when it comes to growing HB McClure?
I believe I was in Colorado when everything kind of shut down. So starting with that weekend, moving through those first 3 to 6 weeks, the world looked pretty different, and the activities really went from day to day business activities to really just dumping that on its head and just trying to create a little bit of certainty through chaos, right? So that was something that I most of us haven't gone through something similar to that. And then over the next year, and even still moving into each day now, it's just being consistent with your approach with your people. It's communicating in an uncertain environment, trying to communicate confidence and trying to just make the best decisions for your people and your business, which, at times can be really a bit of a slippy slope. But at the end of the day, what's right for your people is ultimately going to be right for your business. And from a simplicity perspective, we've tried to maintain, keeping that simple. I think supply chain and inflation has impacted our business. I don't want to say differently, but it's definitely impacted our business. So that's been one of the challenges. And then it's also impacted the labor environment. So it's added a lot of pressure to wages. So it's changed the game there. And we've just had to make sure we're open to pivoting and open to changing the way that we're managing our business, the way that we're creating value for our business, and the way that we're empowering our people to add value as well.
So, is there a particular time, Adam, and you're kind of describing like the whole shutdown, COVID-19, when all that stuff was happening? Is there a particular time in this journey of really helping the team, making sure they know what's going on, feeling like you can be transparent as a leader when we're obviously dealing with the unknown, which I mean, really, we're always kind of dealing with the unknown, right? But is there a specific time in your role where you kind of felt, oh my gosh, I got to figure this out? Like how did you decide to make decisions, you, your leadership team, on the direction of the company, the communication of the team?
The unique thing about HB McClure and HB Global is HB McClure started in 1914, and in 2008 was the first time that someone outside the family of the McClure family actually was leading the business. So Bob Whalen came into the company and was entering a 6-year transition to majority ownership, and then the downturn hits. So that happened, and then really Bob looked at an ESOP as a faster way to transition ownership of the company. And I think at the time, it didn't really have this grand vision of changing the world through employee ownership, but it's really evolved to that. So jumping forward now, I was not in my current role in 2020. I was leading our service business, which was about 130 employees at the time. What I would say about kind of that pivotal moment is everything was happening in March of 2020, and Bob came out and committed to the company pre-PPP, really wildly in the face of uncertainty, and committed to our people that we know this is tough, but here's what we're committed to do. From a layoff perspective, we're going to make you whole. We're going to prepay bonuses, and we're going to do all these things from a monetary perspective, but then also from a communication perspective that really added stability to our people who were going through a really tough time. So that was really shaping the vision for me. For me at the time, leading just a department, to a little over a year ago since I came into my new role, of just being bold in the face of uncertainty and being willing to communicate with transparency, and not hiding anything that's going extremely well or extremely poorly, being open to that. And I think that's something that's really evolved over time. And in 2015, we were working with a great game of business for open book management system. And while we haven't worked with the great game for a couple of years, we do have our own style of open book management. And it's really around transparency, which we believe creates trust within our organization, which is really our number one core value. So I think transparency, communication, working really hard at trying to make the right calls that are right for your people and right for the business, and consistently doing what you say you're going to do. And with 265 employees, and with Global having over 2,200 employees, obviously it's really hard to have a personal relationship on a day-to-day basis with every single employee. So it's about empowering your leaders so that they're aligned with the mission, vision, core values, aligned with kind of my style of leadership, but still in a way that's autonomous to them, but knowing that they have to create their own cohesive team, and they have to communicate, they have to be aligned with the mission, vision, core values.
I love that you said being bold in the face of uncertainty. In today's world, there is a lack of bold leadership. There is a lack of people that are really willing to kind of put that stake and move forward and feel like they can really be bold in their leadership and be okay with having uncomfortable conversations, making those tough decisions. That's what happens when you're in those leadership roles. So you as a leader, as you are coaching your people, what do you find are some ways that you have been able to become more of a coaching leader so that you can create that boldness, not only for yourself, but other people in the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the other, and it's not really that employee voice didn't matter pre-COVID, but it's something that we've identified as being really important moving forward, is the idea of employee voice, and it's that culture of feedback. So a couple of things that we've done is, our leadership team has sitting around the table talking about, hey, we need to make this decision. This is going to impact this group of people and maybe not this group. And really, I had one of our leaders kind of stand up and be like, hey, we're talking about this with really no input from the people who we're impacting, right? So we ended up creating what we call Voice of the Field. We took volunteers, we communicated to the organization, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to create a more direct feedback loop from our field employees directly to the leadership team. So it's really been pretty eye-opening, I think, both for our field employees and for the leadership team, but it's just opening a conversation with them to help them understand the things that we're working on, the challenges that we're having, and then kind of hearing the same thing from our field employees. And then that group from that committee is really their main charter then is being that liaison to the field, helping them understand what's going on. And we certainly haven't fully shown up there, but it's really headed in the right direction. And that's just kind of one example. We're starting right now a women's affinity group. It's around, we want more women in our business. We want more minorities in our business. So how do we do it? Well, we can just talk about it, or we can actually make a change that helps women or minorities feel empowered to be in our business, feel empowered to make decisions, and different things like that improve employee voice. And they're also really exciting from a culture perspective. And then they matter and they change our business. And you have to be open to hearing different perspectives, and you have to be open to really tough feedback and those tough conversations that you mentioned. But it's been a really, really fun experience going through those and seeing some of our field employees be like, they kind of look at you and they're asking really great questions, and then they see something from a different perspective, and then you see that going both ways, and it's been really impactful.
I think that's so great that you gave them that opportunity. And the first thing I thought of was, a lot of times when people implement something like that, the first thing that the team members think is, what is this about? Is this just going to be another meeting? Is the leadership really going to listen to us? Are there really going to be changes? So
Mhm.
talk about the conversations, especially in the beginning. If someone's thinking, "Ooh, I might want to implement something like that in my organization." What was that like? How did you structure it? How did you get those first 3 people and then 6 people, and then what are those discussions look like?
We are also an EOS company, so that's the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so with the EOS model, there are weekly meetings with a weekly cadence of how you run the meetings. And really the meat of the EOS model is this whole IDS, which is identify, discuss, and solve. And at any moment, you can be throwing things on that list, right, of things to discuss. So what we have is what we call an opportunities list for the Voice of the Field Committee, where any member, whether it's the leadership team or the field, can be throwing, opportunities or issues onto that list to discuss when the month comes around. And admittedly, I would say what I'd like to see more of is more dialogue through the month. And we've actually had that, but it is an evolution. And that's the thing that, to be a little bit cliche, but it really makes a lot of sense, is not allowing perfection to be the enemy of progress. Right. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish. After we actually share our goals for the quarter and our goals for the year with that group of field members, we share the different where we can from a confidentiality perspective. There's a couple of things that we're working through that we don't talk about. And we actually have the confidentiality conversation as well, not only with the things that the leadership team talks about, but also with that group. So we're providing a great deal of trust in that team to maintain that there are things that we'll talk about that may be off limits to talk about with the field. And that's one of the responsibilities of those team members. What the conversations look like is the expectation is whenever they come to that meeting, the fourth Wednesday of every month, that they have the top 3 ideas in mind, the ideas or opportunities that they want to discuss. They're supposed to look through the list, which that list right now is about 20 items long. So it's really up to the team members to decide which areas are the most important things that we're going to talk about. And I think we're getting a much more efficient, and it takes a meeting or two to get new team members on board with kind of understanding that cadence. But that's how we structure it. And I mean, we've talked about things like the wage pressures that we're going through. We did a complete overhaul of our, the way we compensate in terms of base wage and bonus. We've delivered a ton of communication around what we're viewing as market catch up. So we did across the board increase. We did a market catch up. We go through the merit increases every year. Because we've acquired a couple of companies, everyone doesn't really understand or view it the same way. So we're trying to create some consistency around that. So this has been a great way to communicate those messages as well, because we have an employee from each location within our business. So then they can kind of hear that and then take that back to their teams. It's been a really great way to provide input and to hear their feedback, to say, hey, we're thinking about this, and we're sharing some numbers, and we're sharing thoughts and realities of what we're facing, and getting their feedback. It's been really a great experience to go through that with the team. But it really has become the voice of the field. And again, it's not perfect, but I feel really good, much better than I did 8 months ago before we started it, with the amount of information that's going to the field and coming back to the leadership team as a result of these meetings.
Yeah, you're fostering this culture of communication, open dialogue, where people feel like they can actually voice their concerns on the things that are happening in the organization, and that there is potential for things to be fixed.
Yeah.
And that's what I love so much, especially in organizations where they have a lot of different layers. There's people that are in one area of the business where the leadership team might not really understand the frustrations or challenges. And so when you give them that opportunity to come together and talk about those challenges, then everyone knows what's going on. And it could be the smallest, easiest fixes. That's what I love so much, is that when
Yeah.
you're opening dialogue, there are things that can be easily changed that would make the culture that much better and the people that much happier.
It's funny you talk about the small changes. So we do monthly communication on our results as well. That's part of the transparency that we're, utilizing. And we share numbers in a way that, hey, this is what we're doing relative to budget, and this is what we're creating, and this is what we're creating per division. And one of the areas is like, couldn't we just do that with pictures? So very quickly, my communication switched from a summary paragraph of what we've done to just graphs, pictures of graphs of what we've done per division. Again, it's something that's really small, but it came from the first conversation. So tracking those changes is also pretty interesting. So we have another bucket on our teams page that has all the things that we've kind of discussed, and something like we have our remote field service training that's our ERP that our technicians are using. They're like, well, I don't know who to talk to if I have a problem, so that's on us. And we have the people that can help you or help our team members, but just showing them that information and then sharing it with the team, like, hey, this is actually the point of contact. Like, yeah, this person can be helpful, but this is the person that's responsible for this. And okay, now that we know this, now we've actually identified a single person that the group, hey, this is the go-to. So that things like that also come from the group.
I would love to touch a little bit on the ESOP and the decision to become an employee-owned company. Not only that decision, but then, how that impacted the employees. I can imagine it's an interesting process to go through.
Yeah, and we're still going through it. So I have a lot to say about ESOPs, and I have a lot to say about our evolution. And Bob is really the main visionary of how this started. So my first thing with ESOPs is just becoming an ESOP alone is really not going to create this amazing culture of employee ownership and employee voice and employee wealth, and having every single employee view themselves as an owner and be able to take ownership of their challenges and feel like they're going to impact the future. Like, it doesn't work that way,
You mean it's
right?
not like the magic bullet to just making culture and everyone happy?
Yeah, it'd be awesome if it was, but that's not the case, and we're still working through that. I mentioned that Bob really didn't have this vision, which our current vision is really changing our business model, like the traditional business model in the US, to change that through employee ownership towards one that has everything that I just said, that has the employee voice, that has leaders that work autonomously, that's not all top down, that's bottom up, forward thinking, that's open to tough feedback, that's open to crazy ideas, that uh, whether it's the new apprentice that just started last week or a field supervisor or a vice president, it doesn't really matter what level you are through the organization, that you believe that your actions impact the future. So jumping back to 2010, again, that was another trying time. Construction was really struggling at that point. Not just, I'm responsible for the commercial side of the business, but residential construction was struggling, whereas the service side of our business was doing pretty well, but still uncertain, right, at the time. Bob was in his second year of the transition, and with the results, clearly there's a very big tax savings with becoming an ESOP. So transparency and candid, discussion here, that was really the focus early on, is just a faster way to transition the company. There's significant tax savings to being an ESOP. It still is expensive to become an ESOP, but Bob felt like that was the right decision at that time. And then it really aligned, I think, with his vision of how businesses can run, and not viewing the world like, hey, whatever somebody in a C-suite tells you, that's what you have to do. That is not his vision of how companies run. And I think he had been in situations like that, and it's not really his desired state. So I think that was really the start of the evolution over the last 12 years to where we've come to now. And I remember in 2010 when we became employee owned, and the original conversation around, hey, I own it now. I'm an owner, and you're going to do this because I told you, and I'm an owner. And it was kind of like, it's not exactly that. So it's really helping people understand what it is, and then going through those first couple of years of distributions, where those shares are being allocated and getting into employees' hands, and they're seeing like, hey, it's 3,000 here, it's 5,000 here. That's not super exciting. It's not really my money. It's not real. It's not like a 401k. So over time, and through some pretty impressive results, we have employees who have been here since 2010 who, have significant retirements built up, which ESOPs are really ownership of the company in the form of a retirement plan. And we have frontline employees that have close to $300,000 in their accounts and in that time period. And that's really, really exciting for us. You try to communicate as much as you can about that wealth not being created in 1 year or 5 years or even 10 years, that it's really over the long run, similar to your 401k. We've benchmarked our results relative to 401k performance, or the S&P 500, and that's been really exciting, but we've never gone down. So eventually we will go down, right? So it's more about the long run. So we're getting through all of that and trying to communicate as much as we can. We have the employee ownership education committee. We've done a lot of different events. We've done things like a core value award that, again, okay, you're not really educating on ESOPs necessarily, but you are creating awareness around your core values and showing that we want to acknowledge and reward and manage to these core values. But we're doing a core value game where essentially employees in the organization can nominate an employee for exhibiting a core value of that quarter. So we have 4 core values, so we do 1 per quarter. So we did this all last year. We're doing it again this year. And we've had some really awesome stories come through as a result of that game. That, again, trust is our number 1 core value. It's tough because we have 4 core values. Always look at trust. Like if you don't have trust, you're probably not going to have the rest. So it's trust, team, great, and growth. So we always talk about trust as our foundational core value, but started with that. We had an employee in the office who was nominated. The education committee for our ESOP views these without names and votes on the stories. So that's essentially, it's pretty simple, but that's how we vote on the winners. So we were excited this first time. We ended up voting for a 25-year employee who is our senior engineer, who literally that morning, I had a conversation with one of our tight partners within the community, with one of our general contractors. And they were just talking about George Peters as this guy who, you know, man, of all things with George, we trust this guy. He's smart and he does all these things, but we really trust him. And then we have the core value game for trust. He wins it. And then immediately after I tell him, hey, we've got this $1,000 check for you, he's like, well, I'm not going to take that. I want to do something for the field. Well, what we decided is we throw a pizza party for the entire company on his behalf. So that was a really cool story. It was a little bit of a, we don't expect everyone to forego their check that they receive, but we've had some really cool stories like that. We've had 3 employees win these last 3 quarters, and it's been really exciting, and there's been some energy from there. But that was a little bit of a tangent on the core value game, but it's still aligned with the type of culture that we're trying to create through the ESOP.
I think that's such a great way for any organization to recognize their people. I love the fact that they are voted just by the story and you don't even know the person. I think that's awesome to kind of keep it anonymous until you
Yeah,
get to see. And that's a great way to recognize team members, and how awesome to see that one of the people that wins just cares so much about the other people on the team that they
it's
want to
pretty
do
cool.
what's good. So I feel like that just creates that culture. It's less about the award, more about just this opportunity to give people that recognition, and it's not just from 1 or 2 people, it's from a group of people. That's a great way to kind of build trust and communication and culture within the team. So anyone can do that starting right now with their core values. It might actually be an opportunity for some leaders to look at their core values, and they might not really have them solidified as much as you do. So I know you said you could talk all day about ESOP, which honestly, it probably could be its own episode, and just talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. I think you shed some light for some people, because I know it seems like a lot of leaders say, "Yeah, ESOP, we have to do it," and it's great, but it's good to also get the other side of it, which is some of the challenges that you might face when going through it. And hey, it might not be the right decision for everyone to go through. So I think it's important to open up that dialogue and conversation. You obviously care about your people. You have all of these really cool programs. You develop your team. You do EOS, which is great. How do you decide what programs to implement? Specifically, I mean, we can even dig into Dream Manager. How was that decision to have someone on your team go through certification, become a Dream Manager, and run that program in the organization?
I think in general, it's great to have all the answers, right? It'd be great to just show up and know exactly what you want to do. And we talked about being open to pivoting and being open to the changes in the environment. So I think just as leaders, you need to be really open to changes in your business, to be open to changes with people and preferences and customers and things like that. Where I wish I could tell you that, I just sat back and came in and knew that, hey, this is what I wanted to do. But really, it comes through conversations like this. It comes through reading. It comes through, discussions with people and with your network of different ideas that could be helpful. And I think when they come up and they're aligned with your mission, vision, core values, I think that's really the core of the decision. Clearly, there's the financial component to that. But when you have people who are fully bought in, and I'm not assessing that every single one of our people are, living, breathing our mission, vision, core values, but that's where we're headed. When that happens, they're going to create results, and you're going to create something really special. And being a part of something special has been something that's important to me, whether it's been on teams that I've been in and my family and business. And we spend so much time at work. So, 8 hours, 10, 12 hours a day, not being able to be in a situation where you can create impact and where you can enjoy that journey and where you can have fun doing what you're doing. There's a lot of things that aren't that fun. There's tough decisions to make as leaders. And, we have plumbers that are crawling into sewage pits, right? You could view like, hey, well, I'm not going to do that because that's not fun. Well, it's not so much about that every single thing that we do every single day is fun. It's about enjoying the journey, being bought into the vision, and having fun with that process of just continually getting better and getting to that spot, right? So, some of these decisions I would say are pretty easy, right? So the decision that we're going to invest, a couple hours a month, 1 hour face to face with our people from our field employees, it's a pretty easy one, right? I mean, it's aligned with our mission, vision, core values. It's aligned with continual progress, with transparency. So those are pretty easy, and I think it's just through conversations you make progress and you create a more positive future. The dream manager is a little bit different. It would be a failure for me not to credit Bob for kind of being the initial person for that. Now, we had a conversation. He told me about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. Again, it's the thing that has gone really well for me at HB McClure is my personal mission, vision, core values is highly aligned with the mission, vision, core values here, right? And I think if you're in a situation where you don't feel like that's happening, whether it's you as a leader or you as an employee, that's a really tough spot to be in. And I would encourage you to get into a spot where you feel like that is the case. But it has been the case for me, and the dream manager is very aligned with my view of really anything's possible, right? So the idea of creating goals, I mean, probably seems like I'm embellishing this story, but when I was in fourth grade, there was a scroll in Mr. Robinson's class that we had to write down our goals. And that was really the first time that and I don't want to say it didn't click for me then, but I had this goal of becoming a state champ in wrestling. And literally I had just started the sport then. I wanted to do that. I wanted to wrestle at Penn State. I wanted to be an engineer at Penn State. And there were several other things on that list, but then, you fast forward and I, still have that sheet. Several of those things actually happen. But when you're writing down your goals and you see them, that's really what has allowed me to be able to focus and kind of dream big. And this is really aligned with that. So I do it with my kids, and we had done some form of goal setting prior to that, but this is kind of a different framework to help those conversations continue. I think that makes it easy, and it's really an exciting process.
Well, that's awesome that you're teaching your kids at a young age to write down their goals. There's even science that talks about writing down your goals alone. You're 42% more likely to achieve those goals simply by writing them down. Most people
Yeah.
are not writing them down, let alone thinking about them. And so the opportunity to really talk to people about their dreams and what they want to do is so impactful. And it sounds like you get to do that with the people that you work with. And you obviously, you can tell the passion that you have for the work that you do, which is amazing. And
Thanks.
when you have that kind of passion, it just spills over into your team. Your team knows, like, they feel like, oh, Adam cares about me as an individual, which is important, especially because, like you said, some of your guys are doing really tough work. They're not just
Yeah.
sitting in an office.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's still a challenge with, I think, getting trust from all of your people just takes time, right? And eventually you'll be judged over your actions unless you're not showing up. But even I can show up to the office every day, but I could be holed up in my office for 8-10 hours a day and I'm not seeing all of our people, right? So them judging me and my actions doesn't really matter because they're not seeing it. So you also got to be really disciplined as a leader to be out talking to your people and to really see what they're doing. I still need to get better at that, and our people still need to get better at it. But there's no doubt that being genuine with your folks, and again, it's, put it in different buckets, whether it's your work, your family, your community, but at the end of the day, it is people that make all these things go, and people matter. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah. It's pretty simple when we break it down. We overcomplicate because that is what people do. All right. Obviously, as a leader, you are always in growth mode, learning, developing, teaching. What is there a book, a podcast, a resource, an article? Is there something that you have read or consumed in the past couple months that you found really helpful in your leadership?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's several things. So I don't know that I can point to just one here, but I've got a quick quote from, and again, I sound like a bit of a nerd here because, wrestling's been a really big part of my life. And, I kind of go back to that a lot, whether it's through coaching and the experiences with coaching kids and seeing how that impact looks. But uh, Kale had said, if you don't continually work, evolve, and innovate, you'll learn a quick and painful lesson from someone who has. I think as a leader, you've got to continually look at yourself and look at your business and challenge your business and work really hard to get better. So that's a quick quote that I think is really impactful. I mean, I actually just finished reading Atomic Habits, which is interesting because it talks, it kind of challenges some of my views on goal setting, but I don't feel like it's necessarily a mutually exclusive proposition where
Mm-mm.
it talks about it's not so much about the goal that is what's driving performance. It's about how the people actually run through that journey and how they're disciplined about showing up every day. And that's really the difference versus the goal. Because so many people have a goal of, say, whether it's being a CEO or being a state champ in wrestling or an Olympic medalist or something like that. But typically only one or a group of people, actually get the opportunity to do that. So is it really the goal? Well, it's more so about how they go about putting themselves in the right environments and about being disciplined to continually work, evolve, and innovate. I think that we could talk at length for a couple of those, but I think that that's a pretty quick one.
That's great. I love that. It is the process. It is about showing up every day. We never, there's no like finish line, right? Like you just keep
Yep.
going, you keep getting better, you keep growing. And what I love about some of the things that even you've said on this show is you've talked about ways that you have approached your team and you still say, I could get better at that. I could get better at that. And so I think that's an important piece too, because we can always get better at the work that we're doing, and your team is lucky to have you as a
Oh,
leader.
thanks.
And I appreciate you taking some time to chat with us about what you're doing over there, what you see as a good leadership, and some of the things that you're doing at the organization. You shared some really great resources for people to be able to take back and potentially implement with their teams, which is great.
Yeah, well, thank you. And Kate, yeah, I really appreciate being here. And thank you for what you and your team at Floyd Consulting is doing for our team as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope there was at least one idea from today's conversation that sparked your interest enough to take action to help you build a coaching culture and improve communication with your team. If you're interested in discovering how your team would rate the culture at your organization, we created a helpful resource. It's our free culture assessment. It'll only take about 5 minutes, and you'll receive a customized report, which includes your overall culture score, as well as your score in each of the 6 immutable principles of a dynamic culture from Matthew Kelly's book, The Culture Solution. Get it at floydconsulting.com/culture. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, lead with culture.